call to order the regular meeting of the Board of Education of Community Unit School District 201, today, Tuesday, July 26, 2011. Ms. McMahon, can we have a roll call, please?
Mr. Armstrong?
Here.
Ms. Caparelli? Here. Mr. Charleston?
Here.
Mrs. Charlton? Mrs. Hancock?
Here.
Mr. Price?
Here.
Mrs. Thomas?
Here.
If everyone will stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. Okay, the first item on the agenda is approval of minutes, and there were a couple of amendments, one to the June 21st minutes, and that's in your orange folder, and I believe that was just a name change, and then the addition of the closed session minutes also from June 21st. For June 9th minutes, Chair will entertain a motion to approve the minutes of the June 9th, 2011 special meeting of the Board of Education as presented.
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. The Chair will entertain a motion to approve the minutes of the June 21st, 2011 regular meeting of the Board of Education as amended.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Chair will entertain a motion to approve the minutes of the closed session of the June 21st regular meeting of the Board of Education as presented.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. At this time, is there any public comment? Okay, moving on to administration, the consent agenda. We have one addition to the consent agenda, and that is under personnel recommendations. Item 1B, resignation of staff. Is there anyone that would like to pull an individual item for separate consideration? Does anyone have any comments or questions, discussion concerning the consent agenda? Okay, the consent agenda consists of personnel recommendations, employment of staff, resignation of staff, resolution to abate working cash funds, and ratification of regular payroll. The Chair will entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda as amended.
So moved.
Second.
Ms. McMahon, can we have a roll call, please?
Mr. Armstrong?
Yes.
Ms. Caparelli?
Yes.
Mr. Charleston?
Yes.
Mrs. Hancock?
Yes.
Mr. Price?
Yes.
Mrs. Thomas?
Yes. I do have a question, though, now that we've approved it. Under the Part 1, the personal recommendations, I was wondering if there was going to be an opportunity for the parents at Manning to meet the principal.
Well, Joe, did you want to?
Yeah, I just wanted to go ahead and mention the fact, sometimes we vote on these things and people are like, well, what did you really do? So I thought I would go ahead and mention the employment, and that was to improve the employment of Ms. Kristen Krustel as interim principal of Manning Elementary School and Ms. Amy Quattrone as interim assistant principal at Westmont Junior High School, and Ms. Amy Levitsky as a mathematics teacher in a split position between Westmont Junior High School and Westmont High School.
Sorry.
And to answer your question, Diane, the board in their own orange folder has a copy of a press release that will go out tomorrow morning on the district blog as well as newspapers. And then I can work with the Manning PTO, and I know they do an ice cream social at the start of the year, so we might be able to incorporate a little bit of a meet and greet for Kristen as part of that function as well.
Okay.
We could probably also do it at Meet the Teacher Day, right? Which is 2 days
Right,
before
right.
school actually starts.
Right.
So,
All right. Next item on the agenda is approval of the Athletico trainer contract. Is there any discussion surrounding this particular item?
I have a question.
Okay.
It's for Mr. Carey. Is this typical for high schools to have a contract with an athletic type company like this?
Typically, when you have an athletic program, either a high school will have a athletic trainer on staff, and then there's no need to contract outside. That trainer would receive a stipend beyond their normal teaching day. Or in the case where high schools like ours, where we don't have anybody on staff who's trained, then you will contract with an outside service as well. And it's highly recommended with the athletic program that you do contract with a athletic trainer.
Do we know why no one else responded to?
No, I actually did get a call from one of the providers after the deadline, and then I asked them why they had responded so late, and originally they thought that they had enough clientele, and then later decided that they maybe could, take us on. So I think it's one of those things, they get kind of comfortable with a certain, group of schools, and they only have a certain amount of staff, and that's why.
Thank you.
Do you have much experience with the 3-year contract? I mean, would you expect that we'd get a lock on the rates, or would it be a rolling?
It's hard to tell with the environment. I mean, conversations with them, they did hold the rate for us, and I would clearly,
Yeah.
work on that again, even with a 3-year. So it's hard to tell, but most contracts usually have some kind of annual increase in them.
Built in, right?
Any further discussion? Okay. The chair will entertain a motion to approve a 1-year contract with Athletico Limited of Oak Brook for the purpose of providing athletic training services for high school athletes for the 2011-2012 school year at the rate of $22.52 per hour as presented.
So moved.
Second?
Roll call, Ms. McMahon?
Ms. Caparelli?
Yes.
Mr. Charleston?
Yes.
Mrs. Hancock?
Yes.
Mr. Price?
Yes.
Mrs. Thomas?
Yes.
Mr. Armstrong?
yes.
Motion carries. Next item on the agenda is the superintendent's report.
Included in the superintendent's report, we have a couple of pieces of good news. One is the Early Childhood Block Grant. It's a competitive grant. And Linda Clawwitter, our Director of Special Ed Services, who's in the back of the room, and I may call on her in a minute to share her thoughts. Kim Anderson, our business manager, and then also Rosemary Blessman, one of our early childhood teacher. They spent numerous hours and a lot of time in completing the grant, modifying the grant, and it paid off. Normally, we receive about $54,000 in funds from the state of Illinois for our early childhood program. This coming fiscal year, we'll receive $118,000, which is about a 64 or 116% increase. And it's in large part due to their efforts. And what that allows us to do now is some dollars that normally would support the early childhood program, now we'll be able to allocate in other areas, and this will go a lot further than in providing services for our early childhood students. I don't know, Linda, did you want to share anything else?
No, I just how excited we were to receive news of the grant, and I also think that it.
Linda, can you come up to the?
I think it's important to say that Rosemary really worked very diligently on that grant, and it was after some very
clear guidance from Kim and some very significant discussions on what really makes a good grant. So we were very excited. Kudos really to Rosemary and to Kim. I'm just happy to be a part of the three. Okay, that's all.
Well, thank you very much.
Well, I just want to say this is just very exciting news, and I think, in an era, where funding from the state is so difficult to get, to lock in on something like this is really a wonderful thing. And of course, I think we all know and recognize that interventions at the earliest possible age probably save us a lot of money down the road. So the more money we put in at the very beginning, the less money that goes out throughout a child's educational life here in 201. So I think this is just a really great thing.
Just a quick question for frame of reference. How many children did we serve this year with the less money?
For that particular grant, 20 children, a half-day program in the afternoons.
How does that compare to the previous year?
It would be the same number.
Right.
We're able to, with the funding that we had in previous years, we were able to serve a maximum of 20 children.
Okay. I'm just trying to,
Yeah,
I mean, this is 116% more. I'm trying to figure out what more are we doing? Are we serving more kids? Is the program better? I mean,
No, and the grant's very specific. It's for a program of 20 children. What this funding does, it was one of the things where when we were looking at how much are we going to ask for, we decided to go big. And we didn't in our wildest dreams ever anticipate getting this level of funding. But, the money that we got before didn't even cover, Rosemary's salary. So we put in, the grant specified, what would it take to have a quality early childhood program. So we put down, did our wish list of things. And so it covers full salaries and benefits for the teacher and aide. We provide transportation, not on our regular routes, for the early childhood students, so that's covered. Supplies, we provide lunch for those students that aren't on free and reduced lunch, so that they have lunch and snacks. They go on field trips. There's some community type of relations, and they go, and then there's some parent meetings that we need to hold. There's some professional development that both the teacher and the aide would like to have, so that's included in here, and we haven't had funds for that in the past. We did put some equipment in there as well for books and materials and things like that, and then also some additional testing materials for the early childhood program. So it really, we should be able to do some things that we haven't been able to do in the past.
and do we know how many more kids beyond 20 we would like to serve? Do we know if there's a need beyond 20? Is 20 the right number? What's magic about 20?
I don't know, Linda. Well, part of it's, space, and then also, to go beyond 20 is additional personnel cost.
Okay.
So,
And that's actually, as we talk about program development, we talk about our early childhood programming overall. It's one of the areas that we would like to discuss in terms of what we can do for our students that are identified as at risk for having a really strong start to learning. So 20 right now is the maximum for the half-day program, but we are interested in talking about how we might expand that.
Do we generally turn kids away or families away from that? I mean, have we been full effectively and are forced to say no to certain families because we're full?
We do have children that we see on a waiting list.
Yeah.
And
Can we have Linda come up to
yeah,
the
Linda,
mic?
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
about that.
I'm sorry.
Mike's not picking you up.
We do have children that we have on a waiting list. What I think that we should acknowledge, though, is as we do our preschool screening and we screen children as young as 3, what we're finding is that we're identifying those 3-year-olds as being as having a certain number of at-risk factors, but we don't have the spots for them because we're offering the spots to the 4-year-olds because they have less time to get ready for what they're going to experience in kindergarten. So what you'll see sometimes at a preschool screening disposition meeting is a recommendation that we have a 3-year-old that's eligible for our First Start program, but we're saying to a parent, and we'd like to enroll you next year. we'd like to enroll your child next year. So we're identifying that that student could benefit from the program, and we're asking the student to wait.
Certainly as a follow-on, I think, to what I think Shannon's getting at, and I think it's a good question to ask. And it doesn't need to be answered tonight, but, what is the market, if you will, for what we could do, if we actually took the 3-year-old at risks and, other stuff. So I think that is probably the question about where could we go with it.
How many more? How many more do we want to try and serve?
So, but obviously we don't, we're not in a position, don't need to answer it tonight. This
Right.
is just good news and great work and big congratulations to all of you. But, I think as we do our strategic planning, it's clearly, hopefully, part of the conversation.
And echoing what Mr. Price said, we all understand the importance of the early childhood piece, and if we invest our resources when children are young, we give them a much more optimistic hope for their future educational pursuits. The other thing I would say is, in terms of the little ones that we're testing, in previous years we've had 3 preschool screening dates, generally 2 full days and 1 that was a half a day. This past year we did 4 days. So, and that was really just in response to the calls that we were getting from the community, and in a conversation with Mr. Carey, he said, yeah, absolutely, let's add another day. So we added a day in in April, which you typically wouldn't see.
It wasn't that long ago in the, in the paper, there was an article specifically talking about a study that was done. It was a very long-range study related to children who were in early childhood programs and how they compared to their peers who were not in delinquency rates and employment rates and all those sorts of things throughout a long view. So the very beginning has a great impact on the very end and transition into adulthood. So
I was hoping that you can, because for me, I know that there's a difference between the First Start program and the early childhood program, but it seems like the state likes to put that under one umbrella, one name, early childhood. So in this particular instance, this grant really, all of what really was specific for what we call First Start.
It was very specific to First Start. That's correct. The funding would be different. Our early childhood program, and I know you know this, but our early childhood program is for our students that have IEPs starting at the age of 3. It's our 3 to possibly 6-year-olds, depending on their needs, but they are students with IEPs. It's a different level of funding. The program that we're talking about here is our at-risk learners, and they have 1 or more factors that can be identified as impacting their future educational progress. So it could be the fact that English is not their first language. It could be a socioeconomic factor. It could be a situation where they have a sibling who is challenged by some type of a disability, so the home environment is impacted in that way. There's a number of factors, and as the preschool screening team finishes the screening activities, they sit together and they go through each child's profile. A part of that screening is actually a pretty in-depth interview with a family, and that information comes to the table. So
then to piggyback kind of what Dan was saying, I think it's important to know in that screening if the number of students that we're talking about is in one area or the other, or is that not necessarily a big deal? I know it's a difference in how you staff the classrooms, whether or not they have a special ed designation or not. Mm-hmm. So I don't know how to phrase this, I guess, or where I'm going, but if the number is more in the at-risk area, that's significant to know, or if it's more in the special needs area.
Whether or not the needs of the students...
Whether or not the students that you're seeing come in through the preschool screening mm-hmm. tend to be more at the at-risk area, or if they tend to be, because I know 5 years from now that number could change, or they tend to be more in the special needs area.
A number of our students that come to us as 3-year-olds who would be children with IEPs come to us through early intervention programs such as Child and Family Connections. So they are at some point identified by other agencies, and they come to us that way. Often in preschool screening, we're identifying that a child is at risk or is presenting in such a way that we believe that further evaluation is indicated. So for some of those children that we identify through preschool screening, the next step is not to go into the First Start classroom, but the next step is actually to do a special education evaluation, and then that may, in fact, require then the early childhood classroom. In some cases, and just because this came up and I want to be clear, in some cases we do have children in the First Start or the at-risk class who also have an IEP. Usually it's because the support that they need in that area is very minimal, and as we all know, our requirement is to educate students in the least restrictive environment. So you will sometimes see children in a First Start classroom who, for example, have a speech IEP, but we believe that they're better served in that classroom with more typically developing peers.
Okay.
Thank you, Linda.
Thank you.
So I just wanted to say thank you because Joel kind of hinted at it as well, but, and you did too, Kim, in this era of, less from everybody, the fact that all of you that went through this process didn't say, oh, well, there's no way we're going to get it, or, well, we won't get that much. I think there's a really strong message for our district in a lot of the things that we do to not look backwards, to look forwards, and you obviously accomplished that, and the result is very impressive.
But there was certainly a lot of encouragement and a lot of expertise on Kim's part, and really Rosemary took that ball and ran with it, and my contribution was very minimal, so kudos to both of them.
I too would like to thank all of you because I'm a huge proponent of going big. If you're going to sit down and
go
take
big
the
or go
time to write the grant and go through the motions, you ask for whatever you think you can get. And I'm really pleased that you guys, were courageous enough to ask for more because I know it's out there. It's out there.
Thank you.
If I could just comment, it was a very nice working relationship between, teachers, administrators, business office, really a nice collaborative effort. Everybody took their area of expertise and, took the grant and went off with it and came back and regrouped and, critiqued each other and questioned each other and came out with this product. So it was a very good process, and I know Rosemary was probably glad when it was over.
And I'll just add one more thing. Probably during the time you were putting all of that together, the rumors were flying about how the state of Illinois was going to cut the early childhood program.
Yes.
So adding to the discouragement of writing a grant for more money in that, under those circumstances, and then have it come through is just that much more. So wonderful.
The other item in the superintendent's report, as the board knows, we did apply for an amendment to our life safety and with the alarm systems for Manning, Miller, and South Elementary, and those were approved. And so what that will allow us to do is pay for those expenditures. Those are upgrades that we're required to do. We're in the process of doing this summer, but we'll be able to pay those out of our life safety, which in turn means our capital projects dollars can go further, and we'll be able to accomplish more with our capital development projects. So that was good as well. Good
It is,
news.
it's excellent. But in terms of numbers, just so they approved 420 to be paid out. We have 662.
Correct.
So we'll have 242,000 left in life safety. And is that unallocated at this point?
Right.
Okay.
Right. And then to kind of update everyone on some of the planning, strategic planning, the subcommittees have drafted goals, and so they're in the process of, our next meeting will refine those goals a little bit and get everybody's input and then start action planning. And that next meeting is August 4th at 7 p.m. in the Manning Community Room. Facility planning, we've kind of talked about Manning extensively. Our last meeting, we talked about South and possibilities for South and possibly addressing some needs in other buildings by utilizing some of the space at South. And the next meeting will also begin talking about Miller and then the high school. And then we want to start that process of developing a short-term plan. One of the things, and similar to what the previous committee did as well, kind of bring forth a plan to the board that will allow the district to get moving next summer, take advantage of some things that we already have in districts so that we can start addressing some needs. And then also at the same time putting together that long-range plan for the district as well.
In terms of the short-term plan, obviously, the Illinois Capital Development Board approved a $1.2 million allocation to us. We have till the summer of '12 to identify those projects, as I recall. And are they specific to which buildings? Is it
I
just
think it's elementary.
Miller and Manning? Oh, I wasn't, I thought the letter referenced Miller and Manning.
I believe so.
But we had a 2-for-1 match in that.
Right.
So, just encouragement that clearly that short-term plan needs to include projects.
Right.
Totaling, call it $4 million for those buildings, because we need to identify those, and then ultimately, if we need to float bonds to cover that, I think as a board and as a district, we'd be remiss not to take advantage of the grant from the Illinois Capital Development Board.
I have a question about facility planning. Unfortunately, I haven't been able to make those committee meetings for various reasons, conflicts. But beyond the existing individual buildings, is there a discussion that's going on about, one school versus grade centers versus having community-based? I mean, is that part of what the facilities planning committee is vetting out, or is it really just looking at the existing buildings and trying to figure out where to spend money?
No, the discussion is, and it was Steve Cash's recommendation, you look at the buildings and you develop them for if they're going to be grade centers or they're not going to be grade centers. He said you really don't want to limit yourself for the future, because you may decide for right now grade centers make sense, and then down the road grade centers don't make sense. And so for that reason, the spaces will be developed so that regardless of what direction the district wants to go, we'll have that flexibility. And that next meeting will be August 3rd, 7 o'clock p.m. in the Manning Community Room. And I will say that those meeting places are tentative. We are cleaning the building, and as we found out with our climate committee, we got bumped in the morning from our normal meeting. I think we'll still be able to use the Manning Community Room. If for some reason we need to switch that location, we'll get that out on our blog and email our committees to make sure that they're aware of those changes. The Climate Committee met last evening and has developed a student survey that we'd like to administer in the fall, asking our students about their specific building, how they feel about the climate, and then we're in the process now of developing a parent survey as well that, again, we'd like to administer in the fall. And that we set a date of August 15th, but it looks like that group, I think, is the most flexible. We will be changing that date because the next Finance Committee meeting is going to be August 15th, and that'll be at 7 o'clock. 6:30 at Manning. We're inviting Liz Hennessy, and we're going to post that so that the full board, if you'd like to attend, I would encourage you to attend, because Liz Hennessy is going to talk about non-referendum bonds versus referendum bonds, and how the tax rate is impacted by referendum and those types of things. Because the Finance Committee is asking those same type of questions about, how do all these things work together. And so we're bringing Liz in. Liz is who works with the district in that capacity. If we were going to look to issue bonds, we'd work through Liz. If we were looking at a tax rate, she would assist the district in drafting that language and so forth. So that's why we're going to leave the Finance Committee on the 15th. That'll be more difficult to move. And then we'll pick a new date, possibly the 16th, something close to the 15th we'll pick for the Climate Committee. And that is my report.
Okay, next item on the agenda is board reports. Does anyone have any particular reports or comments to make? Okay, I'll go. I participated in a number of the committee meetings that have been going on over the past couple of months, and I have to say I'm kind of looking forward to when the school year gets rolling, because I think we'll probably have some additional parent participation in some of these, and certainly some more staff participation, which is a very important component, and to kind of bring everyone together and generate some further ideas. Maria and I also met with Laura Riley and Jason Prisney from the WTA to discuss the climate survey that they conducted among their members. and are looking forward to strengthening our relationship and collaboration with the WTA to the benefit of our students. So it was a very nice meeting. I think we shared some interesting ideas and look forward to getting more. So. Any other comments? Okay, next item on the agenda is a discussion item, evaluation of other district programs or initiatives for 2012 and beyond.
And maybe I'll frame the conversation a little bit. I think the goal this evening, and then you have a list of some of the either reductions or eliminations that have occurred over the last couple of years because of cost containment. And similar to the conversation that we had with Mrs. Clowwitter, there were a lot of good questions of Linda that we weren't necessarily going to be able to answer this evening. I would think the same thing is true of this list. I don't know necessarily if the goal is to go through that list and decide what we want to, investigate, that type of thing, but rather, I think couch it more as a philosophical question as we're looking at the Finance Committee's work, strategic planning, some of these other things that we're working on. Where does that discussion about how to allocate dollars, and when to start reinvesting in the district, those types of discussions, when should those take place? And so I think that, Dan, I think that's kind of the...
Yeah, I mean, it was really just a follow-up to the conversation we had the last board meeting about, we started a conversation about summer school, and I think as we discussed further, the question became, for me anyway, and I think for a couple others, it became this notion of, there's a lot of different programs we've cut over the last 2 to 3 years in particular. There's other programs we're considering as relatively new and add-on type programs. And there's a handful of thoughts that sort of run through the brain for me, which is, in particular, as far as stuff that we've cut, if we're, to the extent that we think about reintroducing, programs that we've historically run, we ought to make some very clear choices and articulate those choices pretty clearly about where our priorities are. And just say out loud, this goes first, this goes second, this goes third, and so that we don't make, so that we don't have conversations in a vacuum, and so that we don't make, decisions that have, all decisions have unintended consequences, but so that we avoid as many unintended consequences as we can. So for me, the notion of putting this together was, what were the things, that we've seen disappear or impacted over the last 3 years that truly are, in my view, programmatic. I included a couple things that don't look programmatic. In particular, like I'll point out the line item about student fees. But as a practical matter, those student fees effectively fund the preservation of other programs. So, money is a fungible thing. It's a funny, sort of process. So these, to me, are about choices that, as we go forward, and I think the question I'll pose and the question I'm wrestling with is this a conversation that we need to have at the board level presently, or is this a conversation that gets fleshed out at the strategic planning level and then revisits the board? Because we ought to be thinking about all of them, not just one or two of them, in my view. Particularly in light of, we're going to see a tentative budget shortly that has, an operating deficit for next year of $460,000. If I round that to 480, it means we bleed $40,000 a month. Last I checked, nobody had a plan to make that better. So I'm not sure how we add anything right now. But we ought to talk about our priorities anyway for hopefully that time in the future when we have that luxury. But right now we're bleeding $40,000 a month, and I'm not sure what anybody is proposing we do about that.
I guess one thing I would say that would help us in this area, I do know at in the Finance Committee, we are talking about that EPIRD program, and that should help us direct funds better. I don't know if it's going to increase any of our funding from any areas, but it will tell us what programs are being more successful, what programs aren't being successful, and how we can allocate dollars differently in that area. And I do look forward to seeing some of those numbers. I know they're many months off yet, but I do look forward to seeing those, and that would help give the board some direction as to which way we go.
You know, Kevin, I think one of the things that's important for the Finance Committee, which we talked about a little bit during those meetings, but the fact that we don't have a really structured, well-defined financial policy, I mean, that kind of speaks to the core of what Dan's pointing out, which is, are we fundamentally in a position to have a conversation about adding, whether you're adding back or adding new, it doesn't matter, adding when we're still running a structural functional deficit. And since we don't have, that kind of really well-articulated financial plan or position or policy for the district, we're sort of left here trying to answer that at this table instead of perhaps trying to answer that in the right place, which is, how do we as a district want to approach our finances?
So to beg the question, and to bring it to a point, the last meeting, the question was, do we want the administration to look into restarting any additional programs in addition to those that we have budgeted? My response to that at this point is, I would love to fold in the conversation about, program priorities into the strategic planning process, a process that the administration and the community is participating in directly, so that at least we can identify the priorities in those programs. But that for now, until we address this gaping and continuous bleeding that we have, the notion of actually having them look at cranking it up, doesn't make much sense until we, let's do first things first, which is, how do we balance our budget?
Well, I kind of stated my thoughts at the last meeting, so I'll try to be brief and go over them again. I just feel that sometimes, as a board, we need to provide direction, and other times we need to ask for options. And I don't think there's necessarily one path that's always going to be right. My idea with bringing up the idea of summer school didn't just come off the top of my head. It came from parents who have approached me and asked about, why don't we have summer school? What happened to it? I wish we did have it. So I'm bringing their concerns to the board table, which I think is appropriate to do. I also feel that if we wait, until we decide, later on in the year, that sometimes time runs out on ideas. And it was my thought that we at least put it out there early enough so that we could have an effective program should we decide to go that route. And, I don't know what kind of ideas Kevin or administration and staff will come up with. I mean, if they may bring us a program that says this is not going to cost us any money, because we're going to charge this amount of tuition, we're going to have this many staff. I don't know. So why can't we ask them to look into something with the best possible hope being a program that won't cost us even as much as it did in the past, which was approximately $9,000. And so I don't know if the notion of they need to present everything to me all at one time and I'll pick and choose, that's one way to make decisions. The other way is to say, this is what I'd like to see. And so I propose this is what I'd like to see happen. And I think there was consensus that at least we would look into that element.
I don't know that
So
there
time-
was, I don't know that there was consensus, because, again, to me, the implicit in the statement to ask the administration to look at that specifically, means that it prioritizes first, above all else.
Not necessarily. It means it makes it a priority. It doesn't mean that it's above all else. It
Well,
means a
if they're
single-
only
it's a
working on
single item.
that, if they're only working on that, though.
Well, they're not going to
As
be
a-
working, they're
as
not
the
going to
notion-
solely be
As the
working
notion of
on.
reintroducing. If they're only working on that, on the notion of reintroducing it, then it prioritizes first above all else.
I disagree. Kevin will establish his own priorities and his own workflow and how he works through these types of things. He does it all day long. I'm just saying that we're giving an indication that if at all possible, if conditions are right, that work out and that we, have a serious plan. And like I said, I don't want to wait till next spring and say, hey, what about? So that's my point of view on it. I guess we'll agree to disagree.
My point on it, though,
It doesn't
I feel like
establish that as the most important priority, but it just establishes it as a priority.
But looking at that, for me also, looking at this, but that specifically feels like a priority because it's a specific. It just feels that way to me. But it also has a price tag or a value to it of $9,000 of what it was. If we're going to come here and say, let's look at it, and we can't spend another dime on it. It's got to come out even. We can't go against our deficit. It can't be more than what we don't have. That's a different conversation as well. I can't believe spending time on it to determine what it could be doesn't cost, because in the teachers' union, when they come up with a curriculum, there's a cost to it. If we are losing money, and we're going to be sitting here in May or March next year and trying to make more cuts, because if we're at $500,000 below our budget currently, this additional 10 means something else is going to go, to me.
And maybe that might be the case, or maybe we'll choose to raise fees. We decided this year as a board that we weren't going to raise any fees. That cost us $35,000 right
They can't
there.
afford to keep coming up on those fees. That please, please, please don't increase those fees again. You're putting the burden on a group of parents that may or may not even use this particular item.
Well, administration put together a packet of information concerning the fees. They compared it to neighboring districts. They didn't seem way out of line or anything, and we chose not to accept that. So in my view, that cost us $35,000.
But student fees have gone up in the last
Yeah,
couple
and
years.
I-
mean, that's
yeah, I
your-
sort of
I think
disagree
that's
with
a
the
little bit of a
characterization that-
misrepresentation, don't you?
No, not at all.
Student fees have gone up,
They
over
have-
$100 grand.
They have gone up, but maybe they've been historically low.
Over $100 grand, they've gone up. So, we're not talking about pennies, the student fees have gone up.
And certainly
In
comparing
the
us
last 2 years, they've
The
gone up.
local districts where we're a 35% low-income district to somebody else who's 10 or less, is a dramatic impact. I think, that notion of lost revenue is a really interesting one in the sense that, again, the $100,000, of raised student fees across the board, 25,000 of that from athletic participation alone funds something. And it doesn't just fund that program. There's a philosophical argument out there that says, are we a pay-to-play district or are we because pay-to-play feels like a private school model. We're a public school, last I checked. Ideally, we offer opportunities to all of our children and all of our families, regardless of their economic means, to fully participate.
I have a question.
Fees kill that.
Here's my question. If a board member comes to the board table and brings something to the board table that's a concern, whether it's to his neighbors or individually, does that just get shelved until we have a certain number of things that are worthy of talking about? Or do we bring it to the board table individually, one at a time, and discuss it at the board table? Because if you bring one thing at a time, does that make it a priority? Does that make that more important than anything else?
I think it makes it a decision in a vacuum, and that's why actually the strategic planning process at this point is so critical. because it actually will give direction about priorities across the areas of concern that the district has. And those are areas of concern that are being worked on presently by staff, community, and it's a robust process. And all of a sudden, if we have some direction within those categories, then we can start to talk about what our priorities really are. My opinion. I mean, it's just, but without it, we're just talking about stuff in a vacuum.
I just go back to the students all the time. I think the most important thing we're supposed to do is, teach and learn, educate the students. And, cost is always a factor, but I thought it was pretty clear that all we were asking was to see a program. Show me some facts about what it could look like, how it would operate, what it would cost. Nobody said we were going to do it. Nobody said we weren't going to do it. All we said was we want to see what it's going to cost. And in my opinion, I think summer school is very vital. And I can talk about one individual thing. I don't need to talk about everything when it comes to something that's going to directly affect the educational learning of the students in the district. I can talk about that one thing.
Out of curiosity, why do you think summer school is perhaps more vital, less vital, wherever you kind of put it, against, say, foreign languages at the junior high level?
Well, the summer school is going to be addressing the kids that need it specifically to help raise their academic standards. Okay, whereas...
And so in your view, how big is that universe as opposed to other universe of kids who
I think it's all big,
served by other
I think
stuff?
it's all big. Don't get me wrong. I would love to put everything back in that's been cut, but I see the elimination of the summer school program. I see $9,000. And again, I think we're taking the conversation to a different point. All we did was ask to see a program. That's the point I'm talking about here. We didn't say we were going to approve it. We didn't say we weren't going to approve it. We don't know. It could be revenue neutral. I doubt it would be, but I'd like to see a program. And then that way, if January, February comes along, we already have all this information. I think it's better to move forward. And the sooner we can start putting some things back in, the better off the district is. If it's possible.
My
That's all
concern
I'm
is even
saying.
whether if you look at it, you spent a fair amount of time, of the administration's time looking at the question, right? And they're fairly reasonably busy, doing
That's
some
what
other
they
stuff.
do. That's what they do.
Having said that, then, you bring that information to the board, and again, lacking, it's a singular conversation, lacking context, lacking broader district context. Whether you feel strongly about pursuing it or ultimately conclude that, the money's not there and we can't, all of a sudden, all we've done is an exercise in sort of spinning our wheels. So regardless of the outcome, until we know, A, what our priorities are from an academic offering standpoint, and then B, where the money's coming from, as for this board member, I'd much rather have my administration working on the stuff they're presently working on, as opposed to going
Which
off
are a
on
bunch
a
of
di-
which are a
as
bunch of
opposed-
singular items.
No, they're
that they'll
full
bring
context
back.
items. They're full context items.
What does that mean exactly?
Full context?
In your, yes, full context.
The strategic plan process is a full district context.
Right, but they're
It's
working
not
on...
a single program.
They're working on more than the strategic
Yep.
planning process.
The facilities planning process is a full district process. There's no singular focus on a singular building or program. The finance conversation is a full district conversation. That's full context. Even the climate committee is a climate conversation within the entire district. I want, again, personally speaking, I would like to see those, in particular, the strategic planning process and the finance process, move along a whole lot farther, because they're truly full context, full canvas kind of conversations, before we start to send administration off spending however many hours they're going to spend looking at a summer school program that, in all likelihood, we don't have the money to fund.
So Joel,
I just dis- I-
whether we have the money or don't have the money, even before that point, if we're asking somebody to research something, if we're just giving them a blank piece of paper, who knows where we're going to end up. If we have some discussion about what are the things that are important to us, for example, some type of summer offering is important to us, but we haven't gone to the administration and said, well, summer school isn't the only option. I mean, can we expand Compass Learning? Can we, there are so many ways that you could potentially offer additional academic enrichment throughout the summer. And by saying, go look at summer school or paint us a perfect picture of, or what the perfect summer school would look like, we're not taking into consideration what may be reasonable options. And I don't feel like until there is a little more progress with strategic planning that we can even say to the administration, well, this is what we want to know. Right now, we're just talking about summer school, like with quotes around it. I mean, summer school can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. And what is important to us? Is the classroom experience of summer school the most important? Or is it having academic enrichment that can reach all the students? Is that the most important? I mean, what is the emphasis that we're going to say, administration, please look at a summer program? Well, what kind of summer program? A distance learning program that's electronic? Is it an in-classroom experience? Is it, what exactly are we asking?
Is it partnered
Shannon,
with
I
other
talked about
districts?
that, I talked about that last time. In fact, I brought up Compass Learning or other, things. And I think really, I would like to leave that up to administration and staff to come up with models that best fit our students. I don't want to tell them necessarily that this is the path you must go for some sort of summer programming. They know better than I do, or you do, or any of us here at the table, what our students' needs are. But I am saying, parents have inquired about it, I've inquired about it. I don't buy that everything has to be done all together and wrapped up with a pretty little bow, and then I accept the whole package. Because the package is just a bunch of pieces put together. I've sat through these committee meetings, I know what's going on there. Individual items, individual schools, individual projects, individual ideas are all talked about. So this is an individual idea. It's something we certainly have done in the past. I don't know the time involved that it would take to put something together, but I'm just saying I don't want to wait to the last minute and then say, yeah, maybe we can do this, and then have it be kind of a mediocre thing because we've got lots and lots of other things going on next spring.
Except that we're giving them no parameters to look at, and just to raise a personal objection to characterizations. I mean, there's nothing particularly pretty about bows on the work that we're doing. The work that's being done is serious work, and to characterize it that way, I think trivializes it. More importantly, to say that the collection is only some of its parts is also trivializes the work of putting together a whole lot of stuff that actually is complementary and works together to create a whole experience in the district, whether it's finances, student offerings, facilities, or otherwise. So, no, I personally reject the notion that, pulling stuff together in its context is just parts. I mean, it's not like chicken nuggets.
But, Dan, administration and staff bring us new classes, new curriculum ideas. We don't spend this kind of time discussing those, and they probably ultimately cost more than summer school would. We don't go through all these questions. So we rely on their expertise and their knowledge and their understanding of our students' needs.
Those offerings are brought to us in a context. And yes, we do ask a lot of questions.
Kevin, this is putting you on the spot.
Well, I don't know whether or not this will help the conversation or not. But, the reality is, in taking a look at a summer school program, what that looks like and what that is, quite honestly, I know, speaking for myself, that's not going to be started tomorrow because we are involved in some of these other things. And so, we'll wrap up the strategic planning process, and that will help, guide some of what we want to do and focus on. And then when, Joe brings up a valid point when we have administrators coming in to recommend courses and so forth, well, again, it's that strategic plan that should be your roadmap, and it should be in line with your strategic plan, and so that helps those conversations as well. Just being part of, the committees and so forth, we do have a student service component of our strategic plan, and they are having discussions about, the fact that we're lacking a summer school program, that, the question about all-day kindergarten, the question about expanding our early childhood program, all those things are being discussed and talked about. So I would not be shocked if, based upon their discussions, if there's a desire, part of that action plan is going to be looking into some of these programming options and what that means for the district. And so I think it all will end up starting to dovetail for us, So, I think we need to wrap up our strategic planning process. My guess is then there will be a clearer picture as to the investigation to an extended school year, whether it's a summer school program, what that looks like, and then that investigation would start. The timing of it, by March, that's when the board wants to have their answers about whether or not, what a summer school program looks like, whether or not it's doable, what the costs are, and whether or not it fits our priorities as a strategic, as part of our strategic plan. So, I think that, the consensus of the board is, to look at, and we're calling it a summer school, but I don't think necessarily that means that we're locked into a classroom of teacher and students coming to school X number of hours, So, all those options will be investigated, and I think, it will dovetail with our strategic plan.
And, I'm just going to add one final comment, and that's this notion of making decisions in a vacuum. And I think sometimes the decisions we make actually create a vacuum, and I think the decision to cancel summer school created an educational vacuum for our students. And I'd like to at least explore the opportunity and options to maybe bring that back. And I think there's a number of other parents who have spoken to me about it feel the same way. And I will leave it at that. And I do agree that there's board consensus to go ahead and move forward with at least looking at it from our conversation last week.
I think I just heard Kevin say that we were going to finish the strategic planning process and then dovetail those conversations into that.
That's fine.
It's interesting to me that we have a number of fairly serious issues in this district, and we've spent more time at this board table talking about summer school than some of those things. And I just need to say out loud to everybody at this table that disturbs me. We have a huge operating deficit that's been in existence for years. We have literally spent more time at this table talking about summer school than we have talking about that.
Any further comments? Okay. Next item on the agenda is the SACIT update. Last SACIT meeting, there was a presentation for member districts concerning itinerant hearing teachers and what they do for our students and the students of our SACIT co-op. Itinerant hearing teachers travel throughout the SACIT member districts and provide direct services to SACIT students and support services to classroom teachers. Approximately 150 students throughout the SACIT cooperative receive these itinerant hearing services. The following student goal areas are addressed by the itinerant hearing teacher: auditory training and sound discrimination, vocabulary development and language support, hearing compensation strategies in a school classroom environment. And they also work with students on self-advocacy so that students become more confident in explaining their needs to their classroom teachers, letting them know when or when they can't, when they can't hear something so that they don't miss out on curricular pieces that are going on. Student services include one-on-one instruction with students to develop the specific strategies for learning in the classroom setting. Hearing itinerants assist with troubleshooting of equipment and help students to become self-sufficient with their hearing devices. There's a large diversity in the types of these equipment, so there's a lot of knowledge, and I think they described it as kind of the Maytag repairman. They show up with all sorts of batteries and wires and things to help students when they have problems with their hearing devices. Hearing instructors provide student evaluations, participate in IEP meetings, and provide other consultative services to a district's general education teachers. They also work with other individuals involved in a particular student's life, including family and friends, whose interactions with a particular child are often impacted due to hearing loss. And students receive and are recommended for itinerant hearing services through a referral process from member districts, and students are often identified through the hearing screening program. And I'll also add that Mary Kay and I attended the July 13th SACID orientation meeting, and that's very
It was
interesting.
great. Amazing, the services that they provide to the children of DuPage County. I was astounded. I didn't know all of the things they provided. It's really amazing. It's an amazing organization.
Okay. And that's it for the SACID update. Next item is finance. Kim, do you want to?
Yeah, I can, yeah. First of all, we have more good news. We received our Certificate of Financial Recognition from the Illinois State Board of Education. Our financial profile score is a 3.65, which places us in the highest category obtainable. And that's good news considering our deficit spending right now. One of the factors that's helping that score is our working cash balance. And we all should be aware is that as we spend that down, that will have an impact on that financial profile score going forward. So anyway, but we're working diligently to try and create efficiencies and make cuts so that we can have a balanced budget here.
Is there any tangible benefit to us to do well in these?
Well, it's nice because if we do decide to go out for bonding and things like that, I mean, these are things that when the rating agency, when we have conversations with them, these are the types of things that we talk about. The next piece of information too is attached is the Certificate of Excellence in Financial Reporting. So that's our comprehensive annual financial report, that very thick document that we prepare when we do the audit. And that report, that's not a report that's required by the district, but it is, again, has a lot of useful information in it for the taxpayer, for the district, a lot of historical information, and gives us a good understanding of where we're at. So again, we received, just got notification too that for our FY10 audit, we did receive the Certificate of Excellence in Financial Reporting. It shows that the district goes above and beyond in terms of financial reporting, and that there's just, people are doing some extra work. And again, having been through bond issuance before, that's a very valuable document. Again, when you're talking to your rating agencies about where your district's headed, they can look at the financial history for the last 5 or 10 years on different things and get a good understanding of what's going on. So that document, while it's very time intensive, is well worth the effort. Okay.
Well done.
Thank you. All right, and then the next item is the adoption of the tentative budget. You have that and received that in your packet this evening. It's in a little bit different format than what we've had before. It's basically, I put together the state budget form, which is what we put together for the final budget. A little bit different presentation than the packet that you've received in the past. It's, all the information is, the same information is presented just in a different way. So one of the things we want to talk about, we did, in our 5-year strategic plan, we did have about a $1.2 million operating deficit projected for the year. We had several community meetings talking about what types of cuts we could make. We did make, plan to make about $683,000. When we look at this, we're pretty close to that. And again, this is preliminary. There's a lot of information that we're still waiting on. We still need to have our general state aid finalized. We don't know what our transportation revenue is going to look like for next year, or what our transportation contract is going to look like as well. We're still waiting on some final grant pieces. We've had a lot of hiring changes recently, so some of those changes will be coming. One of the things that is incorporated in this budget, again, our interest income revenue continues to decline. We're at historic lows for interest rates. This budget reflects some decreases in food service revenue and expenditures both. We did receive the early childhood grant, so that's some additional revenue, but additional expenditure as well. Our federal revenues are decreasing as a result of the ERA grants going away. Salaries, we had 1.6% average overall for non-union staff. In this budget, in the O&M fund, the WCMA, we held the custodial salary rates at their FY11 rate for this budget, and we're still in negotiations, but that's what we're budgeting right now. And then WESPA was per their contract, which I believe was 2.7%. Staff reductions as presented in the reduction conversations that we had are included. O&M revenue, one of the things that changed from our PMA projections, we were predicting a little bit of an increase in rental income, but we actually had a decrease because SASA decided not to hold as many programs in the district. So that was an unexpected decline in revenue. And one of the other things, revenue where or one of the expenses that increased, we talked about that last month, was our workman's comp insurance increased significantly, and I did not have that dramatic of an increase projected in the budget. So there were some fluctuations there. I did make reductions in our legal fees based on our expenditures this past year, and potentially that area could be reduced maybe a little bit more. Building budgets, we did 10% cut across the board, so that was a $62,000 decrease in our supplies and purchase services and capital outlay for those. And then we also had some other operational efficiencies throughout the year when we looked at some of our different contracts for postage machines, vending services. We're going to be renewing looking at doing our lease for our copiers coming up, so I'm going to be looking very closely at those services and how they're deployed throughout the buildings. And next year, I believe our transportation contract comes up for renewal. And so, again, we're going to continue to look at ways to do things differently in the district that will help reduce that deficit, along with looking at our programs. So anyway, overall, we're predicting in this, your first sheet, the fund balance summary, we have total operating funds here. When we look at our PMA model, they also include the restricted funds of IMRF and Social Security. So operating deficit for the non-restricted funds is about $396,000. If you add in IMRF and Social Security, we have a operating deficit of about $433,000.
But she said, is impact and insurance generally rolled into the operating projection for PMA
Yeah,
as well?
they are, yeah.
So I guess, I like this sheet a lot. It's a wonderful summary. I just wonder if we should comport the presentation of these funds to the way the PMA model.
And I will do that.
Yeah.
I'm gonna, there's very complex spreadsheets on there and take a lot of formula manipulation, so. But anyway, so overall, we were pretty close to meeting our target in our anticipated budget reductions. And again, as we continue to refine the budget over the next couple months before we present the final, I'm hoping that we'll come even closer to that target. The next page of the budget summary, again, has your revenues by fund, by source, and then your expenditures. So you can see in the ed fund, we've got about a $615,000 deficit, an O&M fund, a surplus of about $58,000, transportation, a surplus of $139,000, and then and one of the things too, our transportation fund, we did adjust the levy slightly because of the uncertainty with state revenue. So
That's one where we're building the fund balance in anticipation
Yes.
of, or
Of
I shouldn't
not-
say
yeah.
anticipation of, but concern of.
because we're not receiving our funding there.
Yeah.
Okay, and then capital projects, a deficit there, obviously, because we don't generate revenues there. That's money's being transferred in from our working cash for the summer capital projects. And then our fire prevention and safety, obviously, a deficit there, again, because we're doing the summer projects. And our expenditures by object, we had about just under $14.4 million for salaries. Benefits were about $3.2 million. Purchase services, $2.7 million. Supplies and materials, $1.7. Capital outlay of $1.4 million. Other objects, which include special ed tuition, of about $3.2 million. And then some non-capitalized equipment. So total expenditures of $26.7 million. And revenues by source, property taxes were $20.4 million. Other local revenues, $1.6 million. State sources, $1.9 million. Federal revenue of $971,000. And transfers, again, for the capital projects, $1.6 million. So total revenues, $26.6 million, including transfers.
So, just a quick question to go back to, you've got expenditures by object at 26.7. If I wanted to the old accountant in me, if I wanted to reconcile the 28.3 on the front page in total expenditures, the 26.7, that's got
The transfers, yeah. In the state budget form.
It ends up being like 1.6 million.
Yeah, yes, the state budget form does your expenditures into your direct expenditures and then has the transfers. And the front page has the transfers included.
Gotcha.
Okay, does anybody have any questions? And the budget will be on display in the business office until the budget hearing will be on September 27th at 7:00 p.m. at the Village Hall.
So the takeaway is, on a global basis, we're budgeting $1.4 million in capital projects, and we're gonna, from an operating perspective, and if you include the impact and insurance funds, we expect to have a deficit of about $460,000.
Kevin, the money that Dan talked about before that was allocated by the state, are we going to be running a separate list of projects that, satisfy the match for that money? Or is that all just going to be part of, I guess my question is, some of the projects we're doing this summer, is that part of that? Or is it a whole new list that now has to meet that 2/3?
No, projects, what we'll need to do is take a look at the original projects that were applied for, and projects that we're currently doing that would fall under there would go towards our match. So we would be able to
Okay.
do that.
So we'll get some credit then. I mean, for some of the things we're already spending.
Okay, next item on the agenda.
Let's do the motion for the
Which one?
tentative
Spend-
budget.
Oh, I'm sorry, Ms. Mulder. The chair will entertain a motion to approve the adoption of the 2011-2012 tentative budget as presented.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Charleston?
Yes.
Mrs. Hancock?
Yes.
Mr. Price?
Yes.
Mrs. Thomas?
Yes.
Mr. Armstrong?
Yes.
Ms. Caparelli?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, and next on the agenda is the financial statements for the month of June. So in your board book, you have the activity accounts balances. We also have the fund balance summary as of June 30th, which is unaudited. And you would expect to see the fund balance increase because we did receive tax revenue during the month of June. Investments, because we had tax revenue come in, we did do some investments in the month of June. Again, rates are significantly less than what they have been in the past. We'll be receiving some more tax revenue, just a slight amount in August. So I'll have a little bit more money to invest. In terms of overall revenues, again, this is nothing new. The state continues to be behind in categorical payments for fiscal year 2011. The district did receive the first installment of the 2010 tax levy, which amounted to a 49.28% collection rate. This was higher than the previous 3 years. We had averaged about 46.5% over the previous 3 years, but prior to that, the rate had been about 49%. So we did, our revenues are greater, especially in the ed fund, because of the additional tax revenue that we received. The higher than anticipated tax collection amounted to about $323,000. We also had some additional CPPRT revenue. Interest income was a little bit higher than projected. Student fee revenue was higher than we anticipated. And then one of the other items, we received about $234,000 in revenue for room and board, which is for our special ed students. We have a couple of students who are outplaced on a full-time basis. And then we had received some ERA Education Jobs Fund revenue that we didn't know they were going to have that program until I think somewhere around September, October, after we had adopted the budget. So $47,000 of additional revenue there. And the state has vouchered about $352,000 of payments that we haven't received yet. In the O&M fund, revenues, again, wound up higher than budgeted. We've discussed in previous months, this is because we budgeted less for interest transfers. We also received ERA revenue from the prior year of about $115,000. Transportation fund, again, revenues are greater than expected, and this is, again, result of the late state payments, receiving revenue in different fiscal years. And then also our tax revenue was higher than anticipated because we increased the levy. And again, the state has vouchered almost $188,000 for FY11 transportation payments that we haven't received. And unfortunately, we don't know if we're going to receive the fourth payment or not. So we haven't heard any update on that. We talked about that last month. As far as expenditures go, in the Ed Fund, we came in slightly better than budget in the 3-year average. We expected this after we settled negotiations with the WTA based on the salary freezes for the WTA and all non-union staff. We expected to do better than budget because we had budgeted increases. In addition, our legal expenses were about $75,000 less than budgeted, which is a very positive trend for the district. And food costs and related supplies were less, but again, our revenue was less because, so kind of netted out there. And then we also implemented certain cost-cutting measures throughout the year that resulted in some decreases in expenditure as well. And then in the operations and maintenance fund, expenditures were significantly below the prior 3-year average. Again, part of this is because of the capital funds, projects fund being created, and items that normally would have been paid out of this fund are now being paid out of the capital projects fund. And then one of the things that really skews the average was last year, June 30th, we had to transfer money from the O&M fund to the capital projects fund because of the way the abatement worked. So last year, that fund had 130, it was like 130% spent. And so that really skewed the average because we had that $761,000 of additional expenditure. And then transportation fund is below the average as well. Oh, and the other thing too, in the O&M fund, we've really been, overtime has decreased by about $20,000 to $30,000. Conscious effort and to some degree. And then, our rentals are down, so of course our overtime expenditure is going to go down because we won't have custodians staffing it. But we've really been trying to look at how we're utilizing our resources there as well. Any questions? And then the bills are presented for your review.
Are there any questions pertaining to the expense report?
No.
Okay, the chair will entertain a motion to approve the bills for the month of July 2011 as presented in attachment F7 in the amount of $1,697,659.95.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call, please, Mr. McMahon.
Mrs. Hancock?
Yes.
Mr. Price?
Yes.
Mrs. Thomas?
Yes.
Mr. Armstrong?
Yes.
Ms. Caparelli?
Yes.
Mr. Charleston?
Yes.
Is there any public comment? Okay. Board will move to closed session. We had one request for an addition to the exemptions for closed session, and that is also to discuss some legal questions. The chair will entertain a motion to enter closed session for the purpose of discussing negotiations, personnel issues, and legal issues.
So moved.
Second.
Joel,
Call,
will there be
please.
a,
I'm sorry.
will there be a vote?
Oh, yes, there will be a vote when we return from closed session.
Mr. Price?
Yes.
Mrs. Thomas?
Yes.
Mr. Armstrong?
Yes.
Ms. Caparelli?
Yes.
Mr. Charleston?
Yes.
Mrs. Hancock?
Yes.
Thank you. Entertain a motion to approve the administrative contracts for the 2011-2012 school year as presented. Roll call, please.
Well, so moved.
Second.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Mrs. Thomas?
Yes.
Mr. Armstrong?
Yes.
Mrs. Caparelli, yes. Mr. Charleston?
Yes.
Mrs. Hancock?
Yes.
Mr. Price?
Yes. I just wanted to follow up on a comment concerning the percent increase for the administrative staff. It mirrors very closely the percent increase that the WTA members will receive for this fiscal year. Anyone else have any other comments?
I guess I just had a quick one regarding fire safety camp is coming up, and you need to register for that. It's a great program that's run here in the village with the fire department and the police department. It's about, stranger danger and crossing the tracks and riding your bike safely in town. So please, everybody, fill out some forms and get there. It's a totally free camp for the kids. And of course, we have registration coming up July 28th and August 3rd, so. That's it for me.
Very well. Chair will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 All opposed? Motion carries.